Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today we are continuing our coverage of the new Dystopian Wars 3.3 rule set, but we're looking at the more subtle changes that happened in this rulebook that are still going to have a big impact on your games regardless. Now, if you want to go back and watch the video about the 7 big major changes that came in this rule set, you can always find the link to that video down below. And of course, if you want to see more of the videos coming out about this new role set and all the new Orbats that came along with it, I suggest you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for future updates. And with all of those YouTubey things being dealt with, let's get into the video and look at all of the subtle changes that were made that are going to have a big impact. At number 8, I put the tweaks to critical hit markers. There's a number of minor changes to what critical hits do, but they can be quite important for your gameplay. The first one is the Sturginium Flare. It no longer kills all of the SRS you send at a target, which is a big deal because you can now not hold back on anything that you've already sent SRS to. And if the Sturginium Flare does trigger, the enemy ship doesn't just jump forward 3 inches, it jumps forwards equal to the mass of the ship that you were targeting. Mind you, it still takes a point of damage, like it always did before. The other one that was slightly tweaked was Magazine Explosion. The range is now bumped up to 4 inch, so that's pretty much unit coherency, so expect to hit more targets with magazine explosions when they do occur. And thirdly, the one that was also tweaked is Reactor Leak. It's quite a bit more dangerous now, because it causes a point of disorder. And you gotta remember, when I was talking about the big changes, critical hits don't generally cause any disorders anymore, so this one actually does. And it's now not just -1 to Citadel and speed, but a much more noticeable -2 debuff that you get from that one. In addition, the generator shutdown is also changed. It's not just rerolled, but it just gives disorder and it stays on the target, meaning that your chances for getting catastrophic explosions out of it are also pretty much bumped up. The last one to be changed is Shredded Defenses. It pretty much keeps the target's ADV and SDV at 0, and you can't buff it up anymore with any bonuses that apply. However, if you do get any boosts to the dice pool, for instance, the buddies in the squad helping out or escorts, that can still work. Even if the main ship has its defenses shut down, your buddies are still going to try and help you, however insignificant that may be. The next subtle change that was done is that they removed what was previously sometimes referred to as the golden angle. If you've got a target, it can only be in one of your firing arcs for one ship shooting at it. Previously, if you had a situation like in the picture that I've included in here, we've got a Prussian Volsung firing at a Loveless cruiser, and that Loveless cruiser happens to be in both the front and side arc of the Volsung cruiser. In the previous version, you would have been allowed to shoot with weapons that can only shoot to the front arc, and with weapons shooting to the side arc. You can no longer do that. There can be no more targets being hit, for instance, with both torpedoes, traditionally firing to the front, and broadsides. If you're gonna want to make use of all of the weapons on your ship, you better put on your big boy pants and engage multiple targets like you're supposed to, instead of doing weird gamey things where you're sort of at the ideal angle and trying to maneuver like this. However, to avoid any weird situations, particularly massive ships can now still be in multiple arcs. They have added those things to Orbats, however, so if you've got particularly massive ships, you immediately think about the Ice Maiden, for instance. An Ice Maiden can still pretty much be targeted by both of your torpedoes and your broadsides, because, that thing's just so massive. The next subtle change is the fact that now everything has a position trait. A new position trait was added, i.e. the surface trait, and this surface trait and submerged trait, skimming trait, all of these things are now used more in things like determining line of sight and ramming. So it's a bit too much to put into one showcase here, so I do suggest you still read the whole rulebook that came out, but it's a subtle change, but it clears up so many things. Also, aerial was reworked. Technically that was done in version 1.02, but I didn't make a video out of that one, so I thought it was worth mentioning in this one. Aerial targets are always considered to be one range band further than they actually are, unless you are also an aerial target. For instance, if you're a ship trying to fire at an aerial target, and that aerial target is at 18 inches, I'm sorry, you do not get to use your closing range, you have to revert back to long range. However, if something is in long range, it will still remain in that long range bracket that you have, unless of course you're an aerial unit. The next subtle change in the rulebook is the fact that you can't just spam subs and flyers anymore. All of the battle fleets have some restrictions to them, and those are that you can't spam the same unit more than once, so you can only include, for instance, a Kutsov unit once in a battle fleet. And you can only include one aerial and one submerged unit in the battle fleet as well. Kind of a side note that I didn't include in the notes here, this excludes the flagship that you selected for the battle fleet. So for instance, if you've got a Crown Protecteur submersible, which is a submerged flagship, then you can still select one other flagship unit to be in the same battle fleet that the Protector has as well. However, some of the themed fleets that are now in the Orbats can still do away with these restrictions. Some of them just allow you to add some more aerial units or some more submerged units. An example of such is the Ukrainian battle fleet, where well, the Ukrainians are all about the submarines in this game, so it makes sense that the Ukrainian battle fleet does away with this restriction of only one submerged unit in that battle fleet. Also, a very small addition, if you're going to be using the attached rules for this, they have to come from the same battle fleet, and more on which later. In the previous version, every single Orbat had a pretty lengthy description of what unit could be included as an escort unit to another, but that kind of caused a whole bunch of weird rules questions because escort duty reminded people too much of escorts and all of that stuff, so it's all been streamlined. It's now called attached units, like I just mentioned, and it has reduced the need for lengthy Orbat descriptions as well, because it's now included in the main rulebook. What is it? Well, when you're making a list, you decide to take an attached unit and connect it to a parent unit during the gameplay. They are considered to be one unit only during two moments. When they are activating themselves, they'll activate together, and during deployment, you will have to deploy them together. However, they are still considered to be two separate units at any other time. So if you've got any victory and valor cards, for instance, that require you to destroy a certain type of unit, you can just target the one unit that was attached to the other to score that card, no problem. Another change that was made is that the bonus to ADV and SDV has been toned down now. It's only a max of +1 if those two units are in coherency with each other, and not just +1 per model or anything like that. But the advantage is you can still attach a unit now to something that already has escorts to regain some of the ADV and SDV that you may have lost compared to the previous edition. Also, a big change to this is the previous edition said that you can't use any of the special rules anymore, making a bit of a minefield on what you can use and can't use with a lot of questions. Now it clearly states that you can still use some special rules even if they are different between the parent unit and the attached unit. You just look at what rules the lead weapon has, you check what unit had the lead weapon, and those are the rules you can apply now. And, of course, which makes total sense to me, you do have to stay within coherency between the attached unit and the parent unit to gain any of the benefits. And you don't gain any of the benefits unless you actually start within coherency with each other. But to me, that's pretty much what makes most sense anyway. At number 3, I have the next subtle change, even though it's not that subtle really, is Minefields. They're actually scary now. In the previous edition, you only triggered a mine if you actually collided with it, and to be honest, they were only 50mm markers. Anyone who was sort of getting the hang of maneuvering their ships pretty much knew how not to collide with them, and you could often just have your ships, navigating between them without too many issues. That's no longer the case. Mines are now triggered when you move within 2 inches of them, and a pretty significant buff compared to the previous version as well. If you come within 2 inches of those mines, you will suffer an attack. That's with an attack pool of the mass of the ship that first went into it, times 10. That's a massive amount of dice if you do decide to do something silly like, go in there with your flagship. And it comes with the magnetic quality, so expect not to be able to steer after you've gone into a minefield, because mass times 10 is enough to damage any ship out there and reach the armor point, so expect to have a navigation lock, I should say. And another small tweak to it is that mines now only need to be outside of 10 inches of the deployment zone. There's no more limitations on, you can't be within 5 inches of another model or anything like that. So you can make some nice clusters of mines with those as well. However, on the flip side, SRS mine clearance has been tweaked a bit, and I will discuss this more when we start talking about some of the major changes found in Orbats. Again, if you're looking for more content about this, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. But now, one stack of SRS tokens can potentially clear out multiple minefields in one go, so stacking them all together is something you can do, but might not be the wisest choice if your opponent actually has quite a few SRS tokens at his disposal. The next big change I have at number 2 is there's a few tweaks to weapon qualities, but the one that particularly stood out to me was the tweak to sustained. It no longer just allows you to reroll any dice, which, if you're sort of a veteran Dystopian Wars player, you sort of saw this one coming. That was the best weapon quality by a literally nautical mile in this game. It's now been reworked though, that you can still re-roll dice, however you have to pick one type of result that you don't like. And then you get to re-roll all of the dice that had that result that you didn't like, and apply them to your dice pool. And to sort of clarify this rule, I've included a picture of a 12 dice pool that was rolled. You can see the hits in there, and when it comes to the misses, you will notice that there is 1 blank, 2 normal counters and 3 heavy counters. If this dice pool had the sustained quality, you would of course pick heavy counters as the thing that you do not like and want to see rerolled, because it would give you access to 3 rerolls. In other words, you can't just reroll anything anymore, but it is way better than just a reroll blank, because it's a reroll blank on steroids. You can reroll the result that you rolled the most and doesn't really add to, the number of hits. And then finally, number 1, the big thing, the big subtle change that is going to have a massive impact on what you want to field in this game, and it has to do with mass 1 ships and critical hits. Previously, if you had a mass 1 ship and it took critical damage from any type of source, it would just be insta-gibbed and you took it off the board. That's no longer the case. Mass 1 ships can now actually just receive critical hit markers without instantly being destroyed. So you can't have any more of these cheap ways of getting rid of mass 1 in one go through the piercing or magnetic qualities that you found. On top of that, if these mass 1 ships are hit by magazine explosions, Let's not forget, we discussed this, magazine explosion has a much bigger range now. That magazine explosion is a very, very dangerous result to suffer if you're a Mass 1 unit. That doesn't mean that you can't one-shot Mass 1 ships anymore though. You can still one-shot them, but only if you do an attack that actually breaks the citadel, that reaches that citadel value or goes above it. And in the previous edition, piercing weapons were a lot better at getting rid of Mass 1, so they did want to keep some of that gameplay in there. They are still pretty much better at destroying Mass 1s, but that's now because they lower the citadel of any Mass 1 targets by -3, and you mustn't forget, even if you don't one-shot them, there's still that odd chance that you cause a magazine explosion on them and cause a whole lot of damage on that unit in one go. So this pretty much means that Mass 1 ships are more durable in general. And when we'll be discussing the Orbats as well soon, you will notice that quite a lot of those Mass 1 ships have been bumped up to have 3 hull points as well. So I expect to see more reasons than ever before to take those Mass 1 ships and field them in your fleets in this new Dystopian Wars 3.3. And there you have it. Those are the ones that I think will have the biggest impact on your gameplay, even though they are just small tweaks to the rule set in this rulebook. Now, if you enjoyed the video, again, like and subscribe, and I do hope to see you in the next video, where we'll be looking at some of the major changes that came into Orbats, so I don't have to keep mentioning them every time I do an Orbat deep dive. I hope to see you then. Bye!